Thank you everyone for being here today, and welcome to the Organic Farming Research Foundation's webinar, Organic Pest and Weed Management for Service Providers in the West. Whether you are new to organic farming or you just want to refresh your knowledge today, I think you're going to learn a lot, both from our presenters and from the questions that come up during the webinar. So before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that Certified Crop Advisor continuing education credits are available for attending today, and that there will be a QR code to scan at the end of this webinar. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. The general format today is going to be a presentation followed by a Q&A discussion period. Our main presenter is Rebecca Champagne. She is a conservation scientist with the Organic Farming Research Foundation, and I'm Heather Estrada, Research and Education Senior Scientist at OFRF, and I'll be the moderator today. After Rebecca presents, we will also be joined by Dr. Zach Miller, a research and extension faculty member at Montana State University, and all of us will be on hand to talk with you and help answer any questions you might have about pest management in the West and working with organic growers. So first, I'd just like to take some time to introduce the Organic Farming Research Foundation to those of you who aren't familiar with our organization. We are a national level nonprofit that has been operating since 1990. Our core mission is to foster the improvement and widespread adoption of organic farming systems. And to achieve this, we focus on three main pillars, which are advocacy, research, and education. OFRF directs advocacy both on Capitol Hill and through more regional efforts. We work alongside organic farmers and a lot of different advocates and organizations nationwide. Our team monitors organic policy developments, we engage with policymakers, and we build general support for federal organic research funding. Our research efforts include our NORA report, which is, some of you may have read it. Hopefully we'll get a link to it at some point in the chat. It's a nationwide survey of organic producers conducted every 5 years-ish, where we gather information on the specific challenges and needs of organic farmers across the country. And for many years, we've also provided OFRF research grants, which provide funding for new projects to sort of seed new projects, though these are on a brief hiatus as we have been developing our farmer-led research trial program, where we provide support for farmers to conduct their own on-farm research. And lastly, our educational efforts include creating resources, guidebooks, toolkits, and so on, and sharing them through our website or our organic research hub and through webinars like this one. And all of our tools and resources are made available to the public for free. Am I echoing?
I do not hear an echo. You might want to test your audio, Sonia. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. This particular webinar is made possible in collaboration with Oregon TILF and was supported by a grant from WSARE. This particular project aims to develop a series of educational resources and in-person training opportunities that help technical specialists in the Western region to serve organic farmers. And this is the second webinar in our 4-part series. I'm going to pass things over to Rebecca now and let her get to the main content of our webinar, but rest assured there will be plenty of time for Q&A after Rebecca presents. So please feel free to type your questions as they come up or as you think of them in the chat area, and we'll get to them a little bit later in the webinar. So take it away, Rebecca.
Thanks so much, Heather. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here today, especially as the growing season really starts to wind up. We appreciate you taking the time to be here and to learn from us. And yeah, like Heather said, we'll have a Q&A at the end, so there'll be plenty of opportunity to answer your questions, but feel free to drop them in the chat as we go. And we'll also have that QR code up on the screen at the end for crop advisors who are looking to get the IPM credits for today's session. So we're going to start with a quick introduction. We're just going to cover some of the main reasons that pest and weed management are so important, really for any farmers, but in particular for organic farmers, some of the challenges that they face. And then really looking at the systems approach that is taken in organic production. So we mentioned the survey that we do every 5 years or so of organic producers across the country. These surveys have shown time and time again that pest and weed management continue to rank as some of the top production challenges. And this is really seen across all different regions of the US, all different farm sizes and crop types as well. Pest management is a really big source of uncertainty and stress for farmers. It requires a lot of observation, trial and error, and constant pivots in management to really figure out what's going to work. And weeds, insects, and diseases are all going to contribute to crop yield loss. And they're also going to affect the quality of the crop, which is going to reduce the amount of marketable product that the farmer can sell. And that can result in a loss of income for the operation. Pest management is also really labor intensive. It's very expensive. And what some people don't think about is the consumer aspect of it. So pest management is also going to affect the end person here, the consumer. So high pest pressure is going to reduce the amount of marketable product and therefore the availability of certain products, especially fresh crops like vegetables and produce, which can affect the food safety and the prices that the consumer is seeing on the shelf. So organic farmers take what we call a really true systems approach to pest management. It uses many of the principles that are defined in integrated pest management, or IPM. And IPM is a really well-known term, and it in particular is used a lot in conventional farming, but a lot of the principles that are defined in IPM are really at the root of the systems approach that organic farmers are going to take to pest and weed management. So farmers are becoming familiar with the common pests on their operation, and then they're deploying strategies to prevent those pests from reaching what you'd call an economically damaging level or an economic threshold. So after implementing different strategies, figuring out what's working, there's frequent monitoring that's used to really assess how that strategy is working and what may require further action and evaluation. And in the coming slides, we'll cover some examples of what these steps might look like. So at the core of organic pest and weed management is this concept of many little hammers, or using multiple approaches rather than just one silver bullet for management. So organic pest management really starts with learning. What are the weeds, insects, and diseases that are common in the region and on that farm in particular, and really learning how they thrive in that environment. What's their preferred habitat? What is their life cycle? Do they have any natural enemies? And from there, a farmer can set their action threshold. So what would they consider to be the economic or loss threshold before more action is taken? And this threshold can really vary based on the crop. Some crops have higher tolerance of pests than others, but also the farmer's tolerance to a specific pest and when they may want to take action or not. So out of all of the IPM principles, prevention is one of the biggest ones used by organic farmers. This is mainly through cultural and biological pest management strategies. So we'll discuss some of those more in the coming slides. But overall, that prevention aspect can really look like building soil health to support the health and resilience of the crops. Providing habitat and greater biodiversity for beneficial organisms and natural enemies. And then using practices that are going to boost the competitiveness of the crop, such as cultivar selection or using transplants versus direct seeding, and then exclusion methods as well, like row covers or insect netting. So monitoring how those methods work on the farm is the next big step. And then through that monitoring, determining if a greater response is needed or a completely different one. So now we're going to briefly cover the National Organic Program, specifically the pest management regulations, and then some examples of what farmers can do to meet those requirements. So I just want to give a quick refresher on what the NOP does. So if any of you on the call attended our Organic 101 webinar a couple months ago, you'll recall that we had a discussion about what the National Organic Program does, which I'm going to refer to as the NOP. So for those of you who are not at that webinar, I'll just give a quick overview. So the NOP is the USDA's federal regulatory program for organically produced products in the US. And the NOP has several duties. So they develop and enforce the organic standards for crops, livestock, crop handling, as well as imports. They also investigate complaints of organic regulation violations that are made by the certifiers. And they also manage the Organic Integrity Database, which is the online USDA database of all certified operations in the country. And lastly, the NOP uses input from the National Organic Standards Board, or the NOSB, which is made up of researchers, farmers, other experts in the field to help inform and update the organic standards. So Statute 205.206 is the regulations for crop pest, weed, and disease management. So without the use of synthetic pesticides, organic farmers really need to rely on a multitude of strategies to manage those pests. So the NOP outlines the use specifically of crop rotation, the proper selection of plant species and varieties, habitat for natural enemies of pests, and the use of approved biological controls. They then go on to list some more specific practices, but if you'd like more in-depth information, we are also dropping the link to the NOP homepage in the chat. So for weeds, they outline using practices like mulching, grazing, flame weeding, and mowing, but then also thinking about sanitation measures that can be taken on the farm. So removing infected plant materials to remove those disease vectors, managing weeds before they set seed to manage the spread of those weed seeds, and then removing other sort of habitats that could harbor any pests. So for managing weeds, wanted to give some more in-depth examples. So using cover crops, they can compete with weeds. Using physical weed control methods, I know that tillage is still used a lot on organic farms and cultivation during the season. So using cultivation after the crop is planted to keep weed pressure down. On smaller scale operations, hand weeding and the use of hand tools is a really big one, particularly to target weeds that are growing directly in the crop row if you don't want to move the cultivation equipment in too close and risk crop injury. Using various kinds of mulches, mowing in particular in the crop alleyways can be effective. So while this doesn't completely eliminate weeds, it can knock them back before they set seed. Integrating livestock into the operation, so grazing the livestock after crop harvest. Flame weeding is a really good one, especially in small seeded and slow emerging crops. I've used flame weeding in carrots before, and it does a really nice job of giving you a clean seed bed before those carrots come up. But also thinking about those other cultural methods, like selecting crop varieties that might be more competitive against weeds. So looking for varieties with fast growth, with a bigger canopy, which seed catalogs do a really good job of describing characteristics like that. And farmers can also think about manipulating their crop seeding rate or the row spacing to help with that canopy closure and really boost the crop competitiveness over the weeds. So for managing insects, one thing to think about is timing crop planting with insect life cycles. So when is that insect pest most active either in their egg laying or their feeding, and timing the planting to not coincide with that period as much. If you had a high pest pressure in a field one year, rotating that field to a non-host crop the next year to not encourage the population of that pest to keep growing. Using traps and repellents. Planting a habitat increases biodiversity on the farm and provides habitat for natural enemies. Particularly field edge habitat is really great. Using biological control, using parasitoid species, like there's certain wasp species that are great for that. Using pheromones for mating disruption, and the use of organic approved pesticides like neem oil or diatomaceous earth. So I want to make sure in some of these slides that I also mention that there are organic approved pesticides or insecticides that can be used. Obviously, they have to be on the list of allowed substances and approved for use by the producer certifier. But we also don't want to lead people astray and say no, that there are no pesticides or insecticides used in organic farming, because there are approved substances that can be used in all of the pest management tactics. So for managing diseases, a diverse crop rotation that rotates through different crop families can really help break those pathogen life cycles. Thinking about growers that use high tunnels and have that really close growing environment, really tight growing environment. So proper pruning there and proper thinning to improve the air circulation in that growing environment. I mentioned the removal of infected plant tissue from the production areas, because sometimes the diseases can spread from those infected materials onto other plants. Utilizing drip irrigation when possible instead of sprinklers, that's going to help reduce foliage moisture and help reduce the spread of diseases that really thrive in those high moisture environments. Also thinking about soil solarization. This uses clear plastic and really heats up the soil. It can help kill soil-borne pathogens. But then with that preventative aspect, focusing on soil health building practices, building the soil organic matter, building beneficial microbial activity, and then boosting plant health. And again, there's also a number of organic approved materials like horticultural oils and copper fungicide products. So now we'll briefly go over some of the common weeds, insects, and diseases found in the Western SARE region. So these are not exhaustive lists. There's there's a lot of pests, but I can only pick a handful to show. But these are just some species that are quite common and well adapted to the Western SARE region and the climate there. And because monitoring is such a big aspect of organic pest management, I thought it'd be nice to have some good visuals of what some of these pests look like. And also want to give a shout out here to ipmimages.org. If you've never checked out that website, you can type in any sort of weeds or insects or diseases you're thinking of, or even select by crop, and you can look at common pests and diseases with lots of really awesome pictures. So if you're ever curious about what a certain weed or insect or disease symptoms look like on a plant, really awesome website to check out. So these are some common weeds in the Western SARE region. So some summer annual broadleaves and grasses, and then also some creeping perennial species. So redroot pigweed and common lamb's quarters are really fast-growing competitive summer annuals. You have horseweed, large crabgrass, and then Candida thistle and field bindweed are some of those really troublesome creeping perennials. So these are some of the common insect pests, and they affect a really large variety of crops. But the Western SARE region grows a large variety of crops, so I thought these were some good ones to highlight. So the apple maggot, flea beetles, various weevils, the leafhopper, wireworms, and the wheat stem sawfly. And then these are some common diseases that are found in the region, and they really thrive in this kind of growing environment. So you have botrytis, root knot nematodes, bacterial spot, wheat streak mosaic virus, powdery mildew, and blight. So the last section today will cover pest management research findings. So this is going to give you a really high-level overview of some recent organic-focused research and some extension info, and then some of the practical takeaways that can be taken from this research and actually applied on farms. And if you have any specific questions about these, what I'm citing here that I'm not able to answer, I'm happy to dig up the paper and send it to you after and either find the answer for you or send it to you to read as well. So there's continued, we'll start off with weeds. So to start, I know I talked about those creeping perennials. So we'll take a step back and think about what's grown in that region. So there's continued demand for organic grains, both for human consumption and for livestock feed. The Pacific Northwest in particular, that part of the Western SARE region, is a really great growing environment for grains. But farmers are facing really persistent challenges with these creeping perennial species like field bindweed and Candida thistle. So tillage can help with weed control when the weeds are small, but it should not be relied on, and it's not going to really do much when these weeds are really large. And farmers are also really interested in reducing that soil disturbance. So research has been going on across this region that's really looking at that systems approach to weed management. So looking at crop rotation and diversification within that rotation. And these are practices that are really inherent to organic production. So this review paper here focused on organic studies across that Pacific Northwest region. They found that balancing tillage with the cultural methods of crop rotation was more effective for creeping perennial weed management. So combining different cultural methods together. So they were looked at how would you diversify the crop rotation? Well, some of the biggest crops that could help with that were alfalfa, spring barley, winter triticale, especially at high seeding rates. These all helped with that creeping perennial weed management. And alfalfa is a really great option because it's grown over 2 to 3 years, so there's little soil disturbance happening during that time. And there's frequent mowing or cutting of the crop, which can help deplete the weeds. They also found in this review paper that incorporating livestock into the rotation could further help reduce weeds, as well as offer some other co-benefits, such as on-farm fertility inputs with that manure production from the animals. So thinking about what can be done on the farm that's going to offer multiple benefits at once. So since the Western WSARE region has a lot of tree fruit production, I want to make sure I covered some weed management recommendations in tree fruit. So Washington State University has some great research-backed approaches, and we'll also drop the link in the chat to that because it has a lot more info about specific cultivation equipment. So I'll mention some of that here, but in particular, in that link that Mary just dropped in the chat, they actually cover a few different cultivation implements and brands and some of the pros and cons of them, which I won't get into because I don't want to endorse any specific product, but that's a great resource to check out for the tree fruit production. So cultivation is still the standard in organic orchards. It's usually performed every few weeks. But there's a lot of factors that can complicate the effectiveness of the cultivation. So the speed at which the implement can be run, how mature the trees are, and if they can handle some damage or not, and then the amount of soil disturbance too that a particular tool has, as well as the timing at which cultivation is performed relative to how mature the local weed flora is. So mowing is another great practice. Like I said, this really only suppresses weeds rather than eliminates them entirely, but it can help reduce competition in orchards. And if mowing occurs prior to when the weed seeds are shed, this can really help reduce that weed seed bank and the amount of weed seeds that are being incorporated back into the soil. So mulches are another great option, whether they are plant materials or plastic materials like weed mats, whose fabric can be used around trees, and that's in that top right picture there. Cover crops can be really great in the alleys between tree rows, in particular perennial cover crops. These can really help reduce weeds while offering some co-benefits, so building soil organic matter, helping with nutrient retention, reducing soil erosion, especially in any orchards that have maybe hilly terrain. This could be really beneficial. Habitat for pollinators or beneficial insects. So perennial grass cover crops like ryegrass or fescue are a great option, or mixing those with clovers. So because cultivation is still relied on in organic systems, I want to talk about some ways to do it more strategically, particularly before crop planting to help deplete that weed seed bank. So we know that organic farmers are probably still going to be relying on various types of tillage or cultivation to control weeds, but thinking of ways to drive down weeds early in the season so that you don't have to do as much cultivation later on, or thinking of ways to reduce that frequency or intensity of the tillage that's occurring can be really helpful for those soil health benefits. So in organic vegetable production in particular, a farmer is going to be growing a wide array of both warm and cool season crops. So this is going to result in a variable spectrum of weeds that might require different practices. So this research information here out of the University of California looked at how to deplete the weed seed bank before crop planting, so using what's called a stale seedbed approach, as well as flame weeding, and using fast-growing winter cover crops like mustards or cereals that are sown after crop harvest. So, what is the stale seedbed approach? This diagram that I found on this University of California IPM page, I think does a really great job. So the stale seedbed approach is something I've actually done on research farms in my own research trials myself. It can be very effective if done correctly. So this diagram, I think, does a really good job of depicting that. So essentially, you are performing your seedbed prep. This is going to encourage a flush of weeds to germinate. And then you're going to perform repeated shallow cultivation, usually with a tine harrow, to kill those small weeds. I'm talking like white thread to cotyledon stage weeds. After you've done this shallow cultivation about 2 to 3 times in a 2-week period, you sow your crop immediately after that last shallow cultivation, which is then going to germinate before that next flush of weeds and have that competitive advantage over those weeds. This is really good in fast emerging crops like beans. But what if you're growing a really slow emerging crop, like I mentioned, carrots? Well, that's where flame weeding can be very useful. So just a few days before the crop germinates, flame weeding over the beds, which kills the weeds without actually disturbing the soil again. So then the carrots will germinate without there being another flush of weeds coming up at the same time as the very small carrot crop. So these two practices, especially used together, can really help reduce that early season weed pressure, which is going to help the crop have less competition, maybe close canopy against some of those smaller weeds. But the farmer still needs to think about ways to manage weeds after crop planting. Organic farms tend to have really high weed seed banks, so thinking about how to manage weeds still after the crop emerges is also important. So this is mainly done through cultivation between the crop rows, using hand tools and hand weeding as well. But thinking more about how to get some flushes of weeds out before the crop comes up is really going to help with that early season weed control. So now we'll switch gears to some insect management. So some of the best management practices for the wheat stem sawfly. So this is a wheat pest in the West region and in the Great Plains. It reduces wheat yields, and then also because the larvae cut the stems of the wheat, this actually reduces the wheat stubble height in the field and can make fields more prone to winter wind erosion. It can reduce the amount of snow catch that crop can do, and then result in soil water loss. So the sawfly prefers a more hollow wheat stem. So Montana State University and NRCS recommend growing wheat varieties with more solid stems. And it's also recommended to try to leave as much crop residue and stubble in the field as possible because it actually can act as a habitat for parasitoid wasps, which can target the wheat stem sawfly. And then also thinking about ways to provide that field edge habitat for these wasps. So using buckwheat or cowpea on the field edge is going to give them a nice environment. And then practicing no-till when it's possible in the rotation can really help with that residue retention. They also recommended diversifying that wheat rotation to include oats, if possible, as a trap crop. And then also thinking about non-host crops that can be rotated in. So pea, lentil, canola, or safflower, for example. Okay, and I really also want to talk about the spotted winged Drosophila since there's a lot of tree fruit production in that region. So spotted winged Drosophila, they're a type of fruit fly, and they are the leading pests of berries and stone fruits in the US. And this is not just in organic production, it's across organic and conventional. So their larvae actually live inside the fruit. They're highly destructive, and any sort of infested fruit is considered unmarketable by USDA grading standards. So really reduces the amount of marketable product a farmer can sell. So organic approved insecticides are commonly used, I think mainly probably in trust. is a big one. But the fruit flies are developing resistance, which is not great. So since monitoring for pests is really paramount to organic pest management, research has looked at different locations for monitoring and different life stages of the fruit flies. So this research, which was done across various regions of the US, including the Western SARE region, they found that monitoring field edges was actually better for detection and not just looking right into the cash crop, but monitoring those field edges first for the eggs and the larvae was providing earlier detection of the pest before it got into the cash crop, helped farmers implement other measures potentially before a potential insecticide application. And they found that in instances where organic insecticides were still applied, this field edge monitoring technique resulted in 50% less. So if they were spraying 6 times over the season, now they were only spraying 3 times instead. Also, the use of biological controls can work here. So parasitoid wasps. This is being analyzed. This research is still really ongoing. It's a really hard pest to control, but what's being looked at right now is again with that field edge habitat, having that biodiversity to support those parasitoid wasps and other beneficial insects. So the leafhopper, another prevalent pest in the Western SARE region. So this pest has what's called a piercing, sucking mouthpart. So it causes leaf yellowing, it causes green spot, on the fruit, and premature leaf drop in the crops. So all of these are going to contribute to that crop yield and quality loss. And the leafhoppers are going to feed on a wide variety of crops, including but not limited to cucurbit species, carrots, beans, grapes, and berries, so lots of different crops. So some of the best management practices for leafhopper control include that exclusion method that I mentioned earlier. So using row covers to exclude the pest. These can be installed at crop planting and then gradually removed at first bloom to help exclude the pest from feeding on those young crop leaves. But if a leafhopper infestation does occur, a farmer can utilize those sanitation measures we talked about. So removing and destroying that infected crop residue, taking it away from those production areas. But also thinking about beneficial insects again and that whole systems approach. So some of the beneficial insects that will prey on leafhoppers include lacewings and ladybugs. So supporting their habitat is also going to allow their populations to thrive and then hopefully help with leafhopper control. Also, a number of different approved materials that can be used, neem oil, diatomaceous earth, and spinosad, which is the active ingredient in a number of different organic insecticides. All right, so we'll switch gears now to some common diseases in the Western SARE region and some of those best management practices. So thinking about wheat again, the wheat streak mosaic virus is becoming more widespread over the last few years. So this is transmitted by the wheat curl mite, and the virus itself leads to restricted wheat tillering. It stunts the growth of the wheat and then ultimately results in some yield loss. However, the mite and the virus need green grasses or volunteer wheat to survive. So one of the best practices that can be used is to eliminate what's called the green bridge. So, or that 2 to 3 week period prior to wheat planting, if there's volunteer wheat or grassy weeds in the field, that would be considered that green bridge period. And those plant materials in the field can really help harbor the wheat curl mite, which is going to be transmitting that virus. So using tillage or grazing to help eliminate those plants if you see the mites or symptoms of the virus in the field, and doing that before planting of the wheat crop. But it's also recommended to think about how to diversify that crop rotation. So rotating those small grains with broadleaf crops that are not hosts of the virus. So sunflowers, lentils, field peas, for example. So another common disease in the region is bacterial leaf spot. So these are spots or lesions on the crop leaves or fruit, and this is caused by the pathogen species Xanthomonas. So it's seed-borne and it can move to new plants via water splash once the symptoms are present on the plant. So this can make management especially difficult in those close growing environments like high tunnels. So some of the research-backed best management practices are focused mainly on how that pathogen spreads. So starting with a pathogen-free seed source or using transplants, using drip irrigation instead of sprinkler irrigation to eliminate that splashing of the water onto other plants. And also recommended that based on the crop, using that proper row spacing to allow crop leaves to dry after dew or rain, since this pathogen really thrives in that wet environment. Also removing or destroying any infected plant materials. And if a crop does become infected, rotating to a different crop the following season, in case there is the possibility of any infected crop residue still being present in that production area. Also, like I said, mentioning that there are approved materials like copper fungicides, but obviously that has to be approved for use by the certifier and documented in the organic system plan. So proper nutrient management can really help build soil health and can help serve as one of those preventive disease management tools. So thinking about those nematodes, so research has examined how organic soil amendments in particular affect nematodes. And it's been found that using these amendments is going to help build soil organic matter and different organic compounds in the soil, which actually creates a less conducive habitat for those nematodes to live. These amendments are also helping enhance populations of soil microorganisms. And by building that soil health, it's going to increase the plant vigor and the resistance of the crop. And other research on nematode control has also found that planting cover crops of brassica species or sun hemp in particular can be beneficial. So in brassicas, they have an isothiocyanate compound, and there are different allelopathic compounds in sun hemp, which have been found to contribute to that less conducive environment for the nematodes to thrive. So I know we've been dropping some stuff in the chat as we go, but we thought that you might like some of these other resources for learning more about organic pest and weed management, including our organic research hub. And Heather has done such an amazing job on that online resource the last couple of years. So Heather, before we move into the next section, I don't know if you want to mention anything about the hub in particular. But it's a really, really great resource, and it is open access and lots of free materials to look at. Well, Heather, I will hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was amazing. First of all, so much good information. And yes, I would encourage anyone who's interested in checking out the Organic Research Hub. The link is in the chat there. Lots of free resources, research summaries, created by OFRF based on organic research that has happened across this nation for the last, well, we have more current and then less current, but several decades of research. And then also we have links out to a lot of other resources that are available from different extension sites and other organizations that also serve organic farmers. So please check it out. And yeah, so I guess that's all I have before we introduce Zach. So today we're really pleased, as I said, to have with us Dr. Zach Miller. He is an associate professor at Montana State University, and he's also the superintendent of the Western Agricultural Research Center, which is in Corvallis, Montana. Zach's work directly bridges research and on-the-ground agricultural practices. And I'd say Zach is pretty well known for engaging with producers through a variety of different formats and works to understand their needs and communicate practical research-backed solutions. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Zach Miller as he shares his experience and helps answer questions. So yes, please put your questions in the chat. And Zach, I'll maybe let you introduce yourself. And I wonder if you could touch on some of the work you've done or are currently doing in organic pest management. I know there's lots.
Yeah, I mean, so my name is Zach Miller. I'm a professor with Montana State University. The I manage our horticultural farm, which is not in Bozeman. It's down in the southwestern corner of the state in the Bitterroot Valley, which has been a historically important fruit and vegetable producing region for Montana. And we do a lot with work with a lot of organic vegetable growers and some organic fruit growers and some of the organic wheat growers that make up most of our organic farmers in Montana, primarily on weed management. Um, but yeah, I'm the things I'm familiar with. I run a farm. It's about 30 acres, highly diversified. I've dealt with them and also work on lots of the neighboring farms in the area. So yeah, and we do a lot. I'm not going to try to summarize it all, but it's mostly weeds and then the common other pests that occur in our kind of high and dry climates. Yeah, codling moth, a few other like cherry fruit flies and flea beetles and some of the things that Rebecca talked about. But happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Well, I have a question. Actually, I was thinking as Rebecca was presenting, and I know you have a little bit of experience with this, Zach, but just the use of livestock on an organic farm for weed control. Can you talk about that and what your experience has been there?
Yeah,
Is it something you see that's common? Do a lot of organic producers use that, etc.?
I mean, where it can work, uh, yeah, it can be a tool, but in general, farmers already have, they're trying to balance a lot of different things, and sometimes livestock is too complicated, or doesn't pay off. I mean, livestock are uh, a bit- yeah, they're basically mowers. Um, but like what Rebecca was talking about, mowing is a good rescue treatment. But yeah, getting them to work, if you have thistle or bindweed growing in your vegetable crop, like it's not going to work. Chickens will eat the vegetables too, or sheep will eat the vegetables too. Yeah, so where it does work, where you have the setup, the rotation, where livestock can easily fit in, it can be a good option. Um, but it doesn't work for everybody. It does get a lot more complicated. We did a lot of integrated livestock work in grapes and apples, and it worked great for weed control. But when we looked at the labor it took to manage those livestock, you were losing money or breaking even. Um, so it's, uh, but if you can make it work. Uh, they will eat a lot of weeds, some of them, yeah, it doesn't work in every situation.
Thank you. I was wondering also if you could speak to the perennial weeds. I know you've done work with Canada thistle and field bindweed, and Rebecca mentioned them. Um, would you mind talking a little bit about your experience there and what has worked well for you, if anything?
Yeah, yeah. So we were part of a large organic research and extension initiative grant, and we'd been actually working on perennial weed management for 5 or 6 years prior, because it is thistle, quackgrass, bindweed are the major threats to organic production. Probably the most common reason why organic certified organic land is taken out of organic production because it just becomes unmanageable. Um, so yeah, with Ian Burke at WSU and a bunch of professors here at Montana State University, a lot of different farmers across the region, and folks at in the Dakotas and Wyoming as well. A whole bunch of folks worked on this. But it was really tillage. If you look back at the uh, research in the 40s and 50s, that when all agriculture was organic agriculture, thistle management and bindweed management are prominent, especially in the West, because yeah, they were huge issues at that time. The tool that they identified was tillage, frequent tillage, basically tilling within a week or two after new shoots emerged, which works out to be about usually about twice a month during the growing season, which is not it's not great for our large scale organic grain farms and pulse farms. Mainly what we found, we integrated livestock, we tried lots of different rotations. Uh, Mainly what we found was that tillage works and perennials do as well as tillage. So adding a alfalfa or some other perennial into the rotation can actually reduce those populations of those creeping perennial weeds. We also did some work with sort of more intensive practices because these weeds are big issues on vegetable farms as well. And there we found, and this is Heather, you worked on this too. There we really found that some long-term silage tarping, uh, leaving a silage tarp out on those patches for a season or two really gave us the most headway, did better than intensive tillage or competitive cover crops. But could be integrated where we integrated the silage tarps with a cover crop. So planting a rye pea and getting it up and established and tilling it in June and then putting that silage tarp on, that did just as well as the using the tarps alone.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have a question here in the chat just about, I think about nematodes in general. Um, oh, wait, maybe we just want to go with this. We have Brian asking, silage sharp was good for bindweed. Maybe we should just divert back to that for a second before we move over to nematodes.
Yeah. I mean, if so, this is actually a question I had for Rebecca or anyone else in the group, because we've had variable answers of whether or not it is uh, using silage tarps over the winter for seedbed prep is a OMRI approved practice um, because we've had some certifiers that say, well, it says you're supposed to remove any mulches by the end of the growing season. But if you're prepping a field for the next growing season, you are removing it by so that I'm not sure if anyone knows, or maybe it's just something that needs some clarification at the national level, but some certifiers think it's leaving plastic in the field when you're really, often, you know, we've done this in other crops as well, put out silage tarps in October to prep a field for planting in May, and it works great. I mean, you reduce the weed pressure a lot. The other great thing it can do for farms that are in cooler areas where you're not getting a lot of that soil biological activity to cycle those nutrients and break down that organic matter, it can really boost the available nitrogen early in the spring. In areas like ours where the soils are frozen for a lot of the year, a lot of the winter, and keeping that silage tarp warms it up, keeps it wet, and keeps those microbes more active through the winter. And you'll end up with what we often ended up with. 50 to 60 additional pounds of available nitrate and ammonium in the spring where we use a silage tarp, putting it in October, November.
Rebecca, was there anything you wanted to add?
I was thinking about it as Lindsay dropped that awesome clarification into
Yeah.
the chat. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
My only experience with silage tarps has been like March. Well, I live in the Northeast, so we tend to have cold springs. But putting them on like March to May, removing them in May, doing seed bed prep and then planting, and that is really great for weed control. I've never used them over the winter, but I can see how if you're using it maybe for like, like those perennial weeds, perhaps that like it would be permitted. Because technically that is prep for the next growing
Yeah,
season.
I know. The
As
end of
long
the
as they're
growing,
not like,
yeah, it's the
risking grading.
semantics of like when does growing season start and end. Uh, but to clarify with the perennial weeds, because we started off with bindweed, what we did with we had uh, good success with the silage tarps. What we did was install the silage tarps when the bindweed started to emerge in the spring and left it on until uh, September, October, and then pulled it off. We did that for a second season. And when you pulled it off, it looked like a bunch of white asparagus. We did that for a second season and then grew a crop. And this was in fields where the bindweed was really, really bad. You basically couldn't farm it. It was that intense. And by the third year, we grew vegetables, and where we had used those silage tarps or the silage tarps in combination with a fall planted competitive cover crop, there was still bindweed there, but you could definitely farm it. It was, a plant every meter or shoot every meter where you could sort of keep up with it with stirrup hose and just roguing it out. Where we only had cover crop, it was unfarmable. The bindweed, we grew sweet corn, and the bindweed just swallowed the sweet corn, where we only used cover crops.
All right. Yes, looks like there's some more discussion here. Brian is saying that removing tarp before it begins to break apart is what they require at CCOF.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Brian. Anybody else with questions, please type them in the chat. But I do want to return to the person's question about nematodes. Any experience with nematodes?
My experience has been, it feels like fairy dust. I've applied them and not seen anything change. I've applied them mostly for wireworms. And if anyone has a uh, effective organic treatment for wireworms, I would love to hear about it because we have a lot. But uh, but most growers I talk to here have some, but it's not a terrible problem. But we can have on our own farm, we can have wireworms that are so abundant that you can't grow onions and garlic. They will just completely consume the bulbs. And I tried nematodes and it did not work. I tried pyganic drenches and it did not work. I'm not going to try to grow anything organic in that field because it just feeds wireworms.
Right.
Anyone,
I've had
Rebecca, have you used nematodes? Like I'm assuming that you're talking about the beneficial nematodes.
In that research instance, it was actually for root knot nematodes. So building like using cover crops or organic like slower release organic amendments that are going to build like volatile organic compounds and build soil health to create a less conducive environment for the root knot nematodes. Yeah.
right. I'm not seeing too many other questions come in. Zach, I'm wondering, I'm hoping that today there's a lot of extension people, technical service providers on the call. I'm wondering if you have any sort of advice for researchers or extension professionals as they start to work with organic growers.
I guess one of the big things that I've learned, I've, yeah, bit by bit been learning is that kind of the most uh, important thing that we can keep track of, like we want to do research that makes farmers' lives easier and more uh, enjoyable and more profitable. Sometimes we tend to sort of, the typical extension answer is it all depends, and we make models that are increasingly more complicated in terms of management. Um, but you do need to just simplify it down and find like yeah, uh, the ways that they can prioritize their actions that makes their farm more profitable and more enjoyable and more manageable because farming is hard and you're always running around trying to put out so many different fires. Yeah, to give someone a even more complicated model of how to manage their pests is sometimes uh, yeah, it just doesn't work because their lives are already too complicated. And the world is complicated, but sometimes you just need to like boil it down to those simple priorities and have empathy for how because yeah, not only you're trying to grow all that stuff, but you're packing it, selling it, marketing it, um, and trying to manage your crew and keep them happy. And uh, you can't just adopt a super complicated IPM program for every pest you have. You definitely want to use it, use IPM practices, but you need to have it in a palatable package.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think that's why like I really, even though I'm not in the research world anymore, I think that's like that systems approach is so important. And like, what can you recommend a farmer does that's also going to provide those other
Hmm.
benefits to the farm? So you're not just checking off, okay, we controlled this pest, but we also provided biodiversity, habitat for beneficial insects, or we are doing something that's going to build soil health to increase the resiliency of the crop, or we're going to cycle nutrients on farm. So checking off more than one box at a time is
Yep.
also going to make their lives easier.
And the other thing that I've also realized is, yeah, I mean, s- in a similar vein is like uh one of the yeah that it boils down to often boils down to labor costs and return on investment. And uh, yeah, a stopwatch is one of our most important measuring tools. And you can't like every crew is going to be different in how efficient they are, but like if you're comparing a few different like weed management practices, that can be a huge labor sink. Um, and yeah, and you're just looking at uh, yeah, just using that, keeping track of that labor, because in the end, like you could spend a lot of, yeah, we can overinvest in weed management and get a great looking crop. And, but for a farmer, they're really just looking for that good return on that investment because labor is more and more expensive. And so for researchers and extension folks, like, yeah, just empathy for the farmer and keep your stopwatch handy.
That's great. Good advice. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come in to the chat. So I'll assume that folks don't have any more questions. But before we go, I do want to First of all, thank you, Zach, very much for being here. And thank you, Rebecca, for the wonderful presentation. I hope everyone learned a lot. We do have a field day coming up. It is in Zillah, Washington, which is in South Central Washington. So not sure who from the call might be able to join that, but it is going to be at JL's Organic Orchards on June 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific. Hosted by farmer Jeff Leach, and he's going to lead a farm walk, sharing his experience managing pests, diseases, and weeds organically in his orchard. And the event's going to be 2 hours, and certified crop advisors can earn 2 integrated pest management CEUs. So we can, the link, thank you, Mary, has been dropped into the chat, and you can register there. So I think we'll, if there's any other questions, please drop them in the chat. But if not, I will wrap it up and just say thank you to everyone for being here. We appreciate it, and keep watching for our next webinar in a few months.
Yes, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for being here, and thank you, Zach, for joining us. And if there are any crop advisors on the call who are looking for the IPM credit for today, the QR code is there to scan with your CCA app. If that doesn't work for you for whatever reason, please email me. My email's on the screen, and I can submit your info to the societies. Or if you have any follow-up questions or anything, my email and Heather's email are right there. So yeah, I'll leave that up here for 30 more seconds or so, and then we will end the webinar. So thanks again, everyone.